All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight for the District 5 Town Hall. It's been a little bit since I've been able to have one. I think the last town hall I was able to have was at Heritage Oaks. Had a good crowd. I don't remember when that was. It might have been 2020. It might have been 2019. It feels like it was about 1995 with how slow time's been going with everything we've been going through. But we've been able to get this on Zoom. I want to first thank staff. So a lot of our city staffs helped get this going and has put a lot of work into getting this set up so the residents can hear an update and allows me to communicate with you guys. So we do have a couple guests tonight. First, I'm going to go off of schedule here a little bit and allow our state representative, Terry Wilson. Representative Wilson is on the Zoom meeting with us. I'd like to recognize him and give him an opportunity to make a quick comment or two. Representative Wilson, are you there?
Absolutely. Councilman Pitts, thank you very much for inviting me this evening. It's good to see some familiar faces. I noticed that our great city manager, David Morgan, is on, as well as our mayor. So good evening, Mayor. And again, thank you for the opportunity to join this evening. And look, I'm here to listen and to learn. I would like to highlight a couple of things, if I may. Do we have time for that, Councilman?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Terry, please.
Yes. Well, I want to tell folks, we're just 20 plus days away from our 87th legislative session, kicking off January 12th. The Capitol will be open for our opening. The specific rules in terms of how the People's House will be open in terms of requirements associated with temperature taking and all those sorts of things. Those are still coming to focus, and we should learn more by the end of the week of how that's all going to go down. But the focus for this legislative session, and I'm doing this from an appropriations lens as well, is to public health, public security, and public education. And as you know, during the 86th legislative session, we were able to do some tremendous things as it pertained to education finance reform, to basically take some of the burden off of our property taxes and so forth, and put it more along the lines of the state tightening our belts in terms of our priorities, and so that we could really fund our public education the way it should be. Frankly, I might add, without a court order, because we were close to that actually happening. Public health, as you know, there's a lot of problems out there. A lot of folks have been out there unemployed and so forth, and so we are concerned of the number of uninsured that has now hit, and we're wanting to make sure that we take some of the burden off our local governments, both at municipality and especially at the county, in terms of indigent care and medical or mental health. So we'll be addressing those items. I will tell you that the good news, if you want to really call it good news, and from, like I said, from an appropriation lens as an appropriations member, as you may have heard a couple of weeks ago, the state comptroller met with us, and to basically, when I say us, the Legislative Budget Board, to establish the constitutional spending limit for our upcoming session. And in doing so, he reported out that the anticipated 2-year revenues shortfall, 11.5 billion that he articulated back in July, is really going to be a revenue shortfall of around 4.6 billion, and still a shortfall, but a much different picture of the 11.5 that was originally projected in July. And largely that is due to while we had a slowdown in terms of sales with sales taxes, but the good news is it only dropped by 6%. and where we saw a lot of our citizens and so forth doing most of their purchasing online. So, what it really laid out to us, even during a oil and gas not shortfall, but an economic downslide, if you will, because we gain a lot of state revenues from that. What it has demonstrated to us that Texas has grown far beyond just depending on oil and gas. And so we've seen a lot of manufacturing move into Texas over the years. So therefore, we're not the same Texas as we were 10 to 15 years ago, where we see a huge economic impact when oil and gas prices go down. So with that, I just want to say, again, it's good to be here. It's going to be a tough session, not just because of what we have been through with this COVID issue, but also along the lines in terms of our shortfalls in revenue. We're really going to have to tighten the button. Belts. The budget is going to be significantly less for years 22 and 23, and that's the one that we have to really figure out. So stay tuned in that, and again, thank you, Councilman, for inviting me. And if at any point in time there may be a question and so forth, I'll be glad to answer if I can.
Representative Wilson, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the update. And we appreciate you being here. And we'll see if you stick around and there's some questions that are towards you, we'll pass them your way. But once again, thank you for being here. Our new mayor, Josh Schroeder, has joined us as well. Josh is on. I'd like to allow Josh to make a comment or two as well. Mayor, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Hey, there we go. Can you hear me? Perfect. Hey, thank y'all so much for having me on. I'm not just the mayor. I'm also a constituent of District 5. Kevin is my representative as well, and really pleased to live in his district. And he's done great work for this district, and look forward to even more. I really appreciate Kevin being so, trying really hard to communicate with his district and let you folks know what's going on. I know it's something he's really passionate about. I know it's driving him crazy that he can't get out and meet with folks face to face like he has in the past, but appreciate him, looking for some innovative ways to do that, such as this town hall. And I'll let Kevin tell you about, all the wins we've had recently at the city of Georgetown and what's to come in the future. But I just really appreciate his ability, to focus on the small problems that you guys face on a day-to-day basis, but also just keep his eye on the big picture and where we're headed in Georgetown. And I think that we've got a really bright future. We're going to come out of this COVID mess next year stronger than we were even at the beginning, and really look forward to that. And if y'all have any questions for me throughout this, please don't hesitate to ask, but I'll turn it back over to Kevin. Thank you.
Mayor, thanks for joining us. Well, let's go ahead and jump in and go over some of the information that we've provided to talk about tonight. First of all, everyone's ready for 2020 to be over. Well, in the city of Georgetown, it is actually, where our fiscal year ends September 30. So October 1st, 2021 started. So looking back at the fiscal year of 2020, you can see here on the screen a couple of the themes of the year, I guess, if you will. And of course, the number one that's affected us all is the pandemic, the COVID-19, and then also some of the changes that we had to make on the financial front, modifications and amendments to the budget just because of the unknown. But luckily that the worst case scenario we were thinking may come did not happen, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. So a couple of the ways that the city has addressed the pandemic COVID-19 response. One thing we were very concerned about early on was the loss in tax revenue from sales tax. Many of our businesses were closed. We didn't know when they would reopen. Heck, we didn't know if they would reopen. So our budget, the general fund, is the largest individual revenue line item is sales tax. So we had to go in and make sure that we would not reduce the services to our citizens and make sure that we were here for them. So we wanted to make some changes to make sure that that wouldn't happen. And we made some adjustments to our budget because of the sales tax. That was one of the first things we did. And then of course we helped our small businesses as well. Right out of the gate, we ended up finding $100,000 through our economic development fund. We matched that with the Chamber of Commerce. It was only $200,000. We wished it was 2 million or more, but that was all that we could find to legally use as a grant program. And we gave out small business grants to some businesses here in town. Luckily, the county was able to follow up behind us with some of the CARES money and do another round of grants that was higher funding than what we were able to do. But we did that early on for some of our businesses here. We created a fund. We set aside money for utility assistance to help any of our residents who are having a hard time paying utilities. We actually, let's see here, we have not had as much of the use of that as we thought there would be. There's about $20,000 is all that's been used. And I believe, David, correct me if I'm wrong, how much did we set aside?
$1 million. So we have $1 million total utility relief available.
So we put aside $1 million to help our citizens that were having trouble paying their bills, who may have lost work or whatever it may have been. And we've only had $20,000 of that $1 million used up to this point. So the library and many of our offices, city offices, had to change and adjust. Library did curbside pickup for books. Some of the parks had to close immediately. I know in my neighborhood, our playground was shut down for a little while. It's back open now, obviously, but we didn't have any idea what was going to happen with this virus and how it was being spread. Most of our boards and commissions, some were put on hold. Some of the meetings, most of the boards and commissions make recommendations to council. So some of those recommending boards, the business they would take care of just came straight to council instead to try to reduce the exposure to any of the citizens. And we didn't know how this Zoom that we're on now really works. We weren't used to it. That's not how we did business. And so we had to adjust quickly. And once we got that back up and running, pretty much all of our boards and commissions are now running, whether it be virtual. I think they're all virtual at this point still. Of course, we also had some different projects that we were going to work on that we had planned, and we're going to start going in the spring, but we put some of those on hold. Just once again, the unknown without knowing what was going to happen. For example, the mobility committee for a potential road bond, that was something that we had planned on happening a lot sooner than it is. It's going right now still, but we put that on hold for a few months, along with some other of our capital projects that we were going to spend money on. However, even though all the uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen and the shutdown, the growth continued. So Williamson County, we have experienced as a county tremendous growth, along with pretty much every county, as you can see on this slide here, that surrounds Travis County. So the growth is hitting us all. And if you look, the next slide coming up, this is going to show you the housing starts. So we actually broke a record in last year for new housing starts. And the pace has continued in the new fiscal year 2021, which I said started October 1st. So November, as you see there, the yellow box was our largest month in history. So during the middle of a worldwide pandemic, we have more houses being built now than ever in the history of Georgetown. Our commercial starts are falling right along with that as well. So the amount of growth that we're experiencing is tremendous. One thing that we did, I think it was last year, 2019, wasn't it, David, whenever we sold the Blanchard?
That's correct.
Okay,
2019.
So you may have heard about a contract that we sold some excess water to another entity. That was a company called Blanchard. And many people were wondering, why did you sell water whenever we're on water restrictions? Well, that water was in Lake Belton, and we have water rights in Lake Belton, yet we have no pipeline to actually access that water. So that was water that we're paying for to have access to, have the rights to, yet the citizens of Georgetown can't actually reach it. So instead of letting it sit there, we were able to sell that off and actually make a return on that. There is several large water projects that are coming up on the horizon. So as you can see, there are $22.5 million for this fiscal year for a water treatment plant. Wastewater has a large number of projects as well. The $22.5 million is for a part of the water treatment plant. The other part, I believe, will be in 2022. So we're trying to get additional treated water available for our residents. Right now, that's our biggest problem. We have plenty of water under contract. We don't have the ability to treat the amount of water that we need. And quite honestly, our biggest problems are about 8 weeks out of the year. And I'll admit I'm guilty. I like having a green yard. And so many of us are putting a large amount of water on our yards and causing the high demand. The other 46, no, what's 52, 44 weeks out of the year, we're pretty much fine. So it's that July, August, September timeframe in there where it's really hot and dry, and we're watering our yards like crazy. But that was the reason we sold that contract. And like I said, we will have more treated water coming soon. So one thing that recently happened, it will take effect January 1st, was we did do a rate increase on the water and wastewater. There was some inequities in our previous rate structure, that some different customer bases were paying more than their share, and others are paying less than their share and being subsidized. So we try to create equity where everyone pays for their fair share. And also just long term, we needed to raise the rates. We have, like I said, large capital projects coming up. And just for the sustainability of this fund, the water fund, we needed to raise rates to make sure that we can meet all of our obligations and continue to meet the demands and provide water to our citizens. So it was 100% based on a third-party study that showed us that we were lacking there, and we needed to increase rates. So I, along with everyone else in this call, I'm sure doesn't want to pay more money for anything than you have to, but the viability of the fund was what was most important. So one thing that I'm very passionate about is our transportation. I hate sitting in red lights. I hate sitting in traffic. And so last year we called for a citizen committee to start working on a potential bond package. So they've been working since I believe August, is when we started back up. And I've been meeting quite often to try to come up with a potential road bond to come up with some recommendations to send to council for us to then make potentially call a road bond for the May election. So right now the target is around a $50 million bond is kind of the idea, which theoretically should be a build out of about 5 years. Our last bond was in the $150 million range, I believe, and it was more of a 10-year bond. So this one, we're hoping to see the results a little bit faster than the last one. Many residents, you vote for a bond, and then you see these roads on the bond, and then nothing happens for 9 years. So hopefully we'll be able to get something put together that will help the majority of Georgetown, majority of residents, and help our transportation network be more efficient. David, back up one David there. So there was a question I saw someone asked on, I believe, social media about the road bond, Berry Creek Drive from Airport Road to 195. That was part of the 2008 bond program. That is yet to be completed. Back whenever, I believe, I didn't live here then actually. I believe whenever that was being worked on, there was plans for a lot of development across Berry Creek Drive from the villages of Berry Creek. There was a large residential development that was supposed to go there, which has obviously not happened at this point. And so that money is, that approval is still sitting there. Those funds have not been issued. We have not issued those bonds to widen that road because it's just really not needed it. The way we do our CIP, our capital improvement plan for each year, is we try to layer in the amount of debt that we can sustain without really seeing any kind of rate increase. And so we try to prioritize based on need, where that road is not really needed at this point. So we have not widened that at this point. There have been other roads that were much more important, but you can see here also some of the other projects from the 15 bond that will be coming up. So River Route, we got done. The Southwest bypass was done, and DB Wood is being worked on now. Northwest Boulevard Bridge obviously is being worked on now. You can see that bridge is moving a lot faster than I ever expected it to, which it will eventually line up with 971, and you'll be able to keep going straight over. If you need to go to Georgetown High School, you don't have to get on Williams Drive anymore. Just take Northwest Boulevard, take a left, and you're there instead of clogging up the intersection at Williams and Austin. Peter and Michael, I see you have your hands up. We will recognize you guys here in just a bit. We are going to do a Q&A at the end. So I see you there, but we'll have questions here at the end, just FYI. Okay, David, you can bump ahead to the impact fee. So there is a committee right now working to come up with some ideas on a transportation impact fee. So what that would be if a developer were to come in and build a new development, they would pay a fee to the city for the impacts that they're going to have on the transportation network. Those funds would then be set aside and would be used only for road improvements in and around that area. And that's kind of the idea behind it. Like it says there, the purpose to shift the burden of financing new infrastructure from the community at large to owners of the developable land, developers or buyers of new homes. So the idea is to try to be more equitable is kind of the idea. Some other cities in the area have done this. So this will be something that's coming to council in February. Look forward to learning more about this. I don't have much of an opinion on it right now. I know that to me, I would love for the city of Georgetown to find alternative ways to fund transportation. At this point, the only way we fund new roads is through bonds, through debt. So if we can find other ways, alternative ways to fund transportation, we can see some improvements. We can see new roads being built that were not part of a bond package. A bond package is kind of like the Titanic. Once it's approved, it's sitting there and it's waiting to be funded. If we can have some other kind of funds set aside, we can be a little more like a speedboat and hit the areas that need to be addressed, maybe that we didn't have the foresight for. The southeast part of Georgetown is a good example. If you've driven around, there's a Gateway Preparatory School down there, Sam Houston Drive, Rock Ride. That's not necessarily in District 5, but if you go drive around there, there's a lot of houses, many houses, and those roads are basically country roads and they're very congested now. But it was something that we didn't, back in 2015, those were cornfields. No one ever thought those would be developed. So this impact fee will be an interesting topic that will be coming up. So keep a lookout for that. So the next few slides are about our electric utility. So there's been some changes. We restructured the boards that govern the electric utility. And we also created a risk board. We created some risk committees and to review our risk. One of our biggest issues that we had with our electrical was we did not properly assess our risk. And so the risk is something that is discussed pretty regularly now and looked at. It's not going to slip by us again. I'll say by us again. I was not on council when the contracts were approved. I like to make sure and preface that, but we have made some changes that I believe have helped create the improvement that we've seen, which if you were paying attention today, we just announced that we actually lowered the PCA. So we previously had 2 PCA increases that we had to make for the viability of the fund. It was struggling, and we could not allow it to go below 0. Quite honestly, we had to raise rates through the PCA. So we've made changes through our structure, like I said, and also just through the way we operate. We brought on a consultant to manage our excess energy and just really change the strategy and the approach, and it's been beneficial. We were able to lower the PCA, and hopefully we can continue to see improvements that we can do additional PCA decreases later on. But right now we did what the decrease was what we could stomach, if you will. And but like I said, the changes, I fully believe Daniel Bethaputi and his team and the staff have done a great job of turning this around and getting it going back in the right direction. David, I missed anything on there?
No, I appreciate your recognition of the electric staff, and I would just add that there have been a number of staff people, our finance area, as well as just the focus and dedication of council to get us into a better position. And so it's been a team effort with a lot of different steps. And I appreciate your point and 100% agree that this is just one step of many that we need to continue to take, which is to make sure that our electric utility is meeting its goals of being safe, reliable, and having competitive rates. And so we know there's more work to do, and we're committed to get it done.
Thank you, David. Moving to downtown Georgetown. If you've gone downtown lately, it is still booming. It was pretty scary there for a while when everything was shut down, to know if all the hard work that had been done to turn our downtown from a ghost town into a thriving area was going to be just swept under the rug with COVID-19. But the businesses have all come back for the most part. I think we may have lost 2 businesses downtown, I believe was roughly the number from COVID-19, but everyone is back. There's been new businesses open, actually. There was you can see there a little over $3 million in private investment last fiscal year. So that was September 19 to October 20. Well, in the first quarter of this fiscal year, which would be September 1st to present, there's already been 3.1 million in private investment in our downtown, which is just amazing with everything going on and what you hear on the news with the state of the United States and in other areas. And we have $3 million being reinvested in our downtown. So you can see there's a list of some of the businesses that have opened up. That was for last fiscal year. This year, I know there's a couple that have already opened. Tejas Meat Market. And then I don't believe that it has opened yet, but there's District 6, Mikey V's Tacos, City Post, and Foundry 42. Those are all 2021 projects that I know the Tejas Meat is open, but the other ones I don't believe they have. But we continue to see additional investment in downtown and more businesses coming. And the residents are supporting them, which is great. Our economic development, we had a great year last year in economic development. A couple of the wins we had: Texas Speed, we had a contract with Citigroup on their electric. Costco, Champion Site Prep. Champion Site Prep had been in Georgetown and they left and came back now. They're here now. They're back. CB Linens, Ascension, T. Morales, all companies that have relocated or are relocating to Georgetown as we speak. But once again, a total of $68 million in private investment. And also jobs. Jobs are a great thing. 700 plus jobs created with all this economic development. It's amazing. Michaela Dollar and the whole staff has done a great job bringing people in. This next project will be something that will completely change the way the city looks on the north side of town. So this is a Titan North Park. This will be an industrial park. It'll be truly the first industrial park of the city of Georgetown has. We have nothing like this. We have a little industrial loop, but it's not anything like what this will be. The first phase will be a 250,000 square foot buildings. And there's a minimum of $15 million of investment, private investment in phase 1 alone. So there'll be additional investment made after that, because the whole development will be 150 acres. Some of the buildings they are building are already going to be occupied. They've had tenants lined up. So you can see building 1 and 2 there. I believe there are tenants that are lined up for both of those. The others are future development that will be coming. That's not here yet. I don't believe, David, are you aware, are they going to do any spec locations, any of those buildings spec, or is it going to be all whenever they have a tenant in hand?
Actually, one of those buildings has a tenant and the other building is spec.
Okay.
So, and then they anticipate building additional spec buildings based on their confidence in the Georgetown market. Great.
And this fits directly with our strategy we have for our economic development. This is a big win for us. Also, one great thing that we talk about improving transportation. The location of this, if you see, is right near 130, I-35, and of course 195 is just north of that. So instead of having 18-wheelers driving up Williams Drive, instead of having 18-wheelers stuck at red lights on 29 or driving through our downtown, they're going to be hopping off of 35, jumping into this park, hopping back on 130, 35, or 195, and they're not going to be congesting all of our roads that we all drive every day. And they're going to be creating jobs and creating additional sales tax for us. So this is a great win overall. Next up, we have on our financial year 2020 budget. We once again I know I was scared to death whenever this all happened about what our budget was going to look like. That we're going to miss the budget. This is going to be a bad year. Well, that didn't happen. Sales revenue continued to grow, which we'll go over next in the next slide. And then there was with the amount of development we have revenue that is attached to that. So that actually was 46% above what we had budgeted, our development related revenues. And then the general fund itself exceeded the reserves by 7.5. We were $7.5 million over budget. I'm sorry. We ended the year with $7.5 million more than we thought we were going to, basically. I mean, which is just absolutely amazing with everything going on. Of course, you see our bond ratings over there are still very strong, which results in us getting very good rates on any bond debt that we sell. So our sales tax just every month continues to outpace itself year over year. We only had during the whole fiscal year of 2020, during the pandemic, we only had 1 month that actually came in just behind last year. Or David, it was like April, I believe, wasn't it, David? Were we 1% below last year, or were we 1% below the budgeted for the month?
I think April was a year we were flat compared to last year, but all the other months were above 2019, and then as you can see, just based on the final result of our total sales tax for FY20, we exceeded budget by a significant amount in almost all the months.
I mean, it's just amazing that we would have during the pandemic, businesses shut down, and we still have sales tax growth in basically every single month. I mean, just every time we'd get an update from David, I would think he was lying to me. But one thing that there was a change, I believe, at the state legislature a few years back where internet sales, wherever the sale occurs or the product is being delivered, gets credit for that sales tax. So we saw a 300% increase in our sales tax receipts from online sales. So I know at my household, we helped with that. So everybody's staying home, everyone was shopping, and that shopping was actually bumping up our sales tax revenue. So on the next slide, and our pretty much our last item here will be our monthly cost of service. So if you look here, these are all of our cities around us. We're the third lowest in Central Texas. This is a monthly cost of service. So included in this will be your taxes, your electric, water, wastewater, trash, and so on. This does take into consideration the increase in water rates that we just talked about and the decrease in the electric PCA as well. So even with the increase in water and with everything we've had going on with the electric, we're still the third cheapest city to live in here in the Central Texas area. So at this time, I've covered the whole deck, ran through that. We'll try to, I don't know how long everybody's got, but I'll take as many questions as we got. I know there was one question prior to the meeting about the red light on at Verde Vista and Shell. So I'll give you an update. So it looks like our team, the design's underway. The design package was awarded back in September, and we're expecting bids in the spring with an estimated completion in the fall. So it looks like you will have a red light at this point in time based on our current schedule sometime in the fall of 2021 is what the plan is. And I know Barbara White, Ms. White asked that question for me, and I see her on here, so I know she got the answer. So so at this time, I will take any questions. If you want to, you can send them through the chat. You can raise your hand. There's a text line if you're, or an email address as well if you are not logged into the Zoom. If you are not logged into Zoom, if you want to text the question in, it is 512-641-4400. If you want to email a question, it is pio@georgetown.org is where you can send your question. And Peter Nagel, I believe, has the first question, had his hand up. So, and please correct me if I pronounce your last name wrong, please, sir. John, if you could make, there we go.
I was able to unmute. Thank you for taking my question. So I was the one who raised the question about Berry Creek Drive. I'm not sure how much you know about the details, but Berry Creek Drive is bordered by Berry Creek itself for almost 2/3 of the distance of that proposed widening. So I'm not sure what you were referring to when you talked about a development on the other side. I know HEB has purchased the property at the intersection of 195 and Berry Creek there on the southwest side. But I think ultimately the biggest issue with that is the thing that we're perhaps the state rep can mention or talk to is the 195 flyovers and the removal of the crossover at Berry Creek. All those things play together with, I think, what might eventually happen with the widening of Berry Creek.
Are you asking if the widening of Berry Creek is tied in with the future growth and flyover at 195 and other state-run roads?
Well, you know, from my perspective, it almost has to be tied to it, given the recent change of the intersection of Berry Creek and 195. Those long-range plans from TxDOT have that crossover reopening once the flyovers go in. And so without a crossover there, the flow of traffic is probably not going to be warranting the widening until there's a better ingress and egress at 195.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if, you know, the duration that this widening has been on the books, you know, we're closing on 12 years now, seems a bit, you know, out of whack. But, you know, your statement regarding need versus money, I understand that completely and it makes sense. I just, you know, want to know or get a better idea of some idea when it might actually happen.
Well, I can tell you right now on our CIP, we do a 5-year CIP where we plan out our capital improvements over 5 years, which would include roads. And I believe Berry Creek Drive, I mean, it's listed on there because it's approved with a bond, but I believe, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, at this point, there's 5 years and there's the last column says over 5 years, basically. I believe it is in that column right now because we do not see the need for it at this time. So the funds are there. Well, funds are not there. The funds will be there if we issue bonds. And once the need is there, it would probably move up the list. David, go ahead.
Sure. I would just add that that list is reviewed on an annual basis by the council. And so, and 100% agree with what you were referring to in terms of adjacent development or other improvements that could occur on 195, those could be trigger points. There are other projects in 2008 and also a few projects in 2015 that are just design only, or they only have partial funding for the roadway. So example of that is on 971. There was an initial plan by the city to expand 971 and funding authorized for that, but it was also going to be heavily dependent upon TxDOT participating in the expansion of the roadway. That didn't move forward, and so we have bond dollars. We have authorization for 971 for expansion. But based on just looking at on an annual basis and recognizing the significant need that we have for transportation improvements across the city, it's one of those things, just like Berry Creek Drive and other projects, they're going to be considered on an annual basis based on the highest need. I will say that, you know, the council has moved forward on, if you look at the 2015 bond program, we just started the design for the last construction project in the 2015 bond program. So the DB Woods Road will be expanded from 29 north to Oak Ridge, and which is why the council wanted to start moving forward and thinking through the next bond program, because we know that transportation improvements are definitely the highest need. But your point's fair, and I think that once we start seeing improvements and activity occur in that area, then I would not be surprised for council to prioritize that to be done in more of a near-term fashion.
Thank you, David. Okay, I believe Michael Price has his hand up, and I know he had it up earlier, so we'll let Michael go first, and then Gloria Reyes, I saw you had your hand up, so we got you set up for after Michael. Michael, I think you're muted.
David, appreciate you giving me an opportunity to ask a question. And you may have actually addressed this. I jumped on late. Just more for David, just a bit of a concern. The back of the house with the city administration seems to be slowing down even more. As a builder developer, trying to get our permits and everything moving, in a reasonable amount of time. We're not to that unreasonable amount yet, but it does seem to be getting slower and slower. And how are we going to address this so that the builders and developers, and we'll talk about all the additional fees that Kevin had addressed earlier, in February, but the builders and developers, we need to keep going at a pretty good clip right now to keep up with everyone else. David, what are we going to be doing about trying to work the back of the house to keep up with all of that?
Sure. Well, there's kind of two fronts. So in terms of in talking about our development process, some of that is really guided, and you probably well versed in it, but I'll speak to other people that might be on the call that might not be as familiar with it. There was legislation adopted last session, and I know that there is going to be effort this session to make improvements to the bill. It's called shot clock legislation, which would set up specific parameters for approvals and turnaround times. I think there were some unintended consequences on our development process related to that legislation that actually has created more limitations, and in some cases may have slowed some things down from a development review process. We do track those things. We have performance metrics and track our turnaround times. We are very committed to having a good relationship with our development community and having a predictable process and a turnaround time. We actually have, and I invite you to the call, we have a developer call once a month, meeting with staff to talk through projects and making sure that we're addressing current issues. Absolutely, if there's ever any specific project that you have concerns about, there's multiple people you can talk to, me included. So happy to always talk with you about specific projects. As it relates to just our overall volume of development, which Councilman Pitts talked about and showed the volume that we're having, we recognize, especially in planning and inspections with our inspection staff, that our workload is getting significantly high. And so with the uncertainty of the pandemic, we actually wanted to make sure we were being conservative to meet our financial obligations, to make sure we have a balanced budget. And so with the uncertainty of the pandemic, we were very conservative with our expenditure and our staffing plan. But what we've seen the development activity not slow down at all, but increase. And so we're currently working right now on how do we add additional resources in our development area so that we can meet the turnaround times we've identified. But I appreciate your comments, and I think your concerns are fair, and it's something we're tracking closely. So thanks for the feedback.
Thank you, David. I know that Ms. Reyes, you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to ask a question still?
Yes, I would. And thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, David, for including us and certainly extending the invitation to our community. We appreciate that very much. Obviously, I live in your district. However, I work in the inner loop, and I had sent an email to you prior to the meeting regarding that intersection of Rock Ride Road and the inner loop. Today we had another accident. That's probably the 4th or 5th accident that we've had in a very short period of time. And I think I want to say they're just weeks apart. I know there were 2 accidents that were almost literally back to back. There were some improvements, and I'm going to use the word improvements very lightly, that were made to that intersection, and it has worked against what an improvement should do. We've had 1 fatality, and we have had 4 other accidents in a very short period of time. The school district is very concerned about it. I know I've been made aware that the district is working with the city or whoever they need to work with regarding that. But our children and our parents are very concerned about that intersection. And I didn't know what plans, or if you were aware that that is right now it's a high risk intersection with the changes that they've made. There is no traffic light there.
I know I'm aware of it, and I know I'm concerned with several of the roads over in that part of town, including, of course, that intersection there. I'll let David go through with what, I'm not sure. I'll say from a council standpoint, I don't believe that we have directly talked about that intersection. We have talked about both of those roads and needs for improvements from those roads. The money for that is that's another subject. But David, if you could speak to any potential improvements or what we've done there, or any plans that we have that you're aware of.
Sure. No, and thank you, Ms. Reyes. Thank you for sharing your concerns, and we share those concerns with you. Those improvements, and I understand you're putting quotation marks around the improvements that were recently done, were done as a result of activity that we've seen and concerns about safety. The additional steps that are currently being made right now is we're going to have a proposal coming in front of council in January to lower the speed limits, so that the speed limits have to be adopted through an ordinance and changed that way. And we think that some of the issue is the rate of speed that's being allowed, or that's occurring on the inner loop as well as on Rock Ride. And so we think that will help in the near term. We've also already started design on a new signal. So the council has approved a signal to be, so it was at Verde Vista and Shell Road was one of the locations for a signal. The other location was on Williams Drive at Escalera, I think. And then
Williams and Estrella.
Estrella. And then the other one was for a signal at Rock Ride and Interloop. And so that design is started. It actually takes a little longer to do the design than you might think, but we anticipate for the bidding process for that project to occur this spring, for construction to start in the summer. And we're working to get that intersection with a signal as quickly as possible. In the near term, we'll continue to monitor it to see if there are any other short-term measures we can take. But I think reducing the speed is going to be a significant help. And I 100% agree in terms of being concerned about that location. I will say that that's one of the challenges we have with such fast growth that we're experiencing. I would think that, frankly, and also just as a side note, the council is, in looking at the 2021 bond program, the council's, some people have asked about, because when the 2015 bond program was done, there was a 10-year outlook to say, what are our needs for traffic and transportation over the next 10 years, and to fund it through that. But councils specifically said, hey, we need to actually be looking at things in a shorter time frame, so a five-year window. Because of such the dynamic growth that we're experiencing, we want to make sure that we can be more responsive to address where the highest needs are. And so I would think that if we have known the kind of pressures we're going to see at Rock Ride back in, when the bond program was being put together in 2013 and 14, that Rock Ride may have been on the list. The other thing, and Councilman Pitts mentioned, is the transportation impact fee could potentially provide some significant funding. Just to give you some comparisons, and they're not apples to apples comparisons, but it's just to show we've had impact fees in our water and wastewater fund for a number of years. We go through a review process. We follow the legal requirements for all of that. We're going through that same process for transportation, but in the water and wastewater fund alone this year, because of the growth that we were experiencing, not only in our city, but city limits, but all our water territory, our impact fees in water was $28 million for this year. And that's to build a master plan line, so that to make sure that it's not being put on solely on the back of existing ratepayers, but but the development community and the growth is helping fund some of those infrastructure improvements. So the same idea behind transportation. And what Councilman Pitts said is those dollars can be used and be more, not flexible, but can be basically applied quicker than maybe bond programs, to go through a full bond program to go through an election. So sorry, that's a little long-winded answer, but the immediate thing is we've got some immediate steps we're taking But also, I think some of the work that we're doing on impact fees, as well as the mobility bond and considerations on that, will help provide and address these kind of issues that occur in other parts of our city where we see fast growth.
Thank you, David. Ms. Reyes, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the question. And yeah, David, I'm glad you brought up the, obviously the traffic light. I'd forgot about that one when we talked about the other two. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the issues there. And it is very concerning, but kind of what David was saying there, it's, I don't know if it's the traffic impact fee or something else or a combination, but having a way to address the concerns that come up, such as this intersection, is a problem whenever you have bonds that are passed every 5 or 10 years. It's hard to address those issues when there's not another way to fund that. So just FYI, Mr. Hinkle, Jim Hinkle, I see you have your hand up. You'll have the next question, then Brett Pyatt. First, there was a question sent in by text. There was a question about the timing of Costco. When would Costco open up? And the answer to the question is, I don't know, because they have until December 2024 to open up based on our incentive that we offered to them. So I guess it is possible they could open after that, but they would have no incentives available to them from the city of Georgetown at this time. So in order to receive the incentives that the city has provided, they must open by December 2024. Wish I had a better date nailed down to give you than that, but that is what I have now. David may have something else.
Well, just their response, I think when they announced their purchase of the location and the plan to open a store, several media outlets were asking for timing, and they said, Costco's response was, well, keep driving by the location, and when you see an open soon sign, you'll know we're about to be open. So they're, obviously they've got their own strategic, plan and measures for when they're going to be in place. But Councilman Pitts said that correctly in terms of when the incentives are triggered. And so they've got the sooner they get in, the better, the better the situation will be for them based on the way we have things structured.
David receives that same exact question every night at home from his wife. So, okay, Mr. Hinkle, Jim Hinkle, if you'd unmute yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for taking the time here to visit with us. Listen, this is kind of off the cuff question here, and it's just curiosity. Do you know if there's any plans to build another post office in this town, say on the west side with all this growth?
I'm not aware of that. David, are you aware of any plans from the Postal Service?
There are not any specific plans, but we have, there have been some discussion with the post office. Obviously we would support that. We would, figure out a way to be supportive of that to occur. But I'm not aware of any specific plans, but I think that's you're not alone in expressing interest in that. And we would, from a city perspective, be happy to help facilitate that when the federal government's ready to move forward.
Mr. Hinkle, does that answer your question?
Can I quickly just ask one more question and I'll be off?
One more. We'll have.
It's very quick. It's very quick.
Go ahead, no
I
problem.
saw plans where Williams Drive was going to be expanded and then a beautification project. Is that still in the works?
We did a master plan for the Williams Drive for what it would look like. What we wanted to see it kind of redeveloped at, as with, there were some medians in there, and with cutting down on the ingress and egress on Williams, making it where there were maybe more shared access to different lots or different developments and commercial businesses. So that way there'd be less turning on there, maybe making some roads right out rather than allowing just right out only, so you can't go turn across traffic. The issue with Williams, and David, I'll let you come in after me. If you can look at Williams, and you can kind of see the phases it was developed in, the timeframes, the years that it was developed in roughly. So from basically 35 to probably about Riverbend or so. You can kind of see how the right of way is not as much in that area. The development on there is all residential, which has now been turned to commercial or commercial use. There are houses that are now offices and such. But then past that, it kind of becomes more commercial to roughly Lakeway. And then past Lakeway to DB Wood or Shell Road, you can see it was developed differently. The right of way is a lot bigger. There's larger shoulders. So the widening of Williams is problematic because we're built out in our right of ways at least closer to 35 than we are out west. The real solution, so some of the master plan is supposed to fix and make the flow a little better. The number one part of the master plan was to fix the timing of the red lights or the traffic lights, which has already been implemented. That was done, a couple of years ago. But the real solution for Williams Drive is diversion, getting people off of Williams. The Northwest Boulevard Bridge is huge. It's another basically east-west road that we have now that will cross 35 that we didn't have. The Rivery is a relatively new road still, Rivery and Wolf Ranch Parkway. We had no connectivity there. The Southwest bypass that connects 29 to Leander Road, then the county's portion from Leander to 35. Now, if you want to get to 35 and you're on Williams Drive, say at the HEB, you don't have to turn down Williams Drive or 29. You can go all the way and hit 35 to head to Austin or wherever, right there by Interspace Caverns. So creating diversion and creating other ways to get around town to reduce the reliance on the citizens to Williams Drive is the real solution. David?
Well, you pretty much covered it. But the only thing I would add is that you'll see we're currently doing design work, and we received a grant funding to expand the Williams Drive and Booties and Lakeway intersection to add turn lanes. As Councilman Pitts said, that there's some limitations in the right of way and our ability to expand really feasibly without starting to take significant property. And so trying to expand intersections to slow down bottlenecks or to help relieve some bottlenecks will be important. The other big project that could be considered that's on our master plan as we've looked at Williams Drive is to put a median down Williams Drive. And you might say, wow, how is that going to help? Well, as Councilman Pitts said, that one of the big issues with traffic on Williams Drive is the number of curb cuts and the number of turn movements that are allowed. So having that center lane that's kind of the chicken lane, is I think what some people have called it, actually causes more congestion than helps. And so part of making Williams Drive more efficient as a roadway is to try and limit some of the turn movements so we can increase the ability for a flow of traffic. So those are some specific projects that I know the intersection we've got funding for, and we're moving forward with the design, and you'll see that within the next 12 months. But some of the other projects that may be more immediate, specifically on Williams Drive, would be the median construction. And then 100% agree that we've got to think about how do we deal with traffic on Williams Drive is creating other roadways for people to go on, so that not everyone has to go on Williams Drive to travel on the western side of Georgetown.
And one geographic issue we have here in Georgetown, if you look at Williams and 29 kind of going, is we have a lake right in the middle of them. Connecting those roadways has been difficult. That bridge over DB Wood is not a cheap bridge. Just take a look down how far down it goes, and we'll be having to widen that relatively soon. It'll need to be widened, but crossing other cities, the reliance on Williams and even 29, without that north-south connectivity, it's been very, very difficult. And like I said, the lakes are kind of help create that. There is a question on here that was texted in about Shell Road and the 2015 road bond. I will address that after we allow Brett Pyatt to ask his question.
Thank you, Councilman. So my main question is mostly for the mayor, maybe the state representative. Obviously, we're like in nine months of flatten the curve, and we're all kind of tired of COVID and the lockdowns and businesses and things being limited. Does the city of Georgetown have an out, as I know City Councilman put it, where we're just not going to participate in keeping things shut down and kind of following the pact? And I mean, we can only follow emergency orders for so long. So maybe since the mayor's new, if you'd like to shed some light on what his plans are, where do we kind of draw the line? That kind of, what everybody wants to know.
Sure. Kevin, you want me to address this one?
Yeah, that's fine, Josh. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely valid question, and like you, certainly feeling the impact of the long-term shutdown, and just in lots of different ways, and am sensitive to that as very much. What I would tell you is this: one, I've got a lot of grace for Governor Abbott and Judge Gravel and Mayor Ross when he was having to make some really difficult decisions back in the spring. That they were hearing a lot of doom and gloom scenarios, and some of those certainly very, very scientifically possible. But as you said, we've been at this now for almost 9 months, and my biggest issues with where we're at right now is we need to take a really hard look at the process by which we're making these decisions. To be real blunt, you shouldn't be asking me this question, because mayors should not have the authority to shut down cities and economies for 9 months, just based solely on their personal authority. Decisions need to be made by the officials elected to make those decisions. And so I have said that whenever possible, however possible, I'm going to turn these decisions over to your city council. They're the ones that have the authority to vote. Certainly if we were ever presented with some truly, emergency situation like a tornado or God forbid, a mass shooting or something like that, yeah, the mayor needs to step in for a very short period of time and restore order. But as soon as possible, the decisions need to be pushed to the elected bodies. And the same goes, whether that's the state, county, or country. No one person needs to have that much authority in their hands for this extended period of time. And then the last thing I'll say is I believe very, very strongly that, while the virus is real, while it's dangerous, and there are things the government can and should do to protect us, but there are also constitutional limits on what a government can do, even if it is the right thing to do. And I will tell you that under no circumstance do I ever believe that the city of Georgetown can shut down a church or shut down a political gathering. I think those are constitutional rights that are enshrined in that document, and we just cannot violate those rights. And I don't intend to do that. Now, that being said, I also don't intend to violate any order from the governor or the county judge. There are processes by which we challenge laws in this country, and I'm always happy to follow the correct legal process to challenge something. But I'm also not going to thumb my nose at the authorities that purportedly have the right to make those rules. We'll see them at the courthouse if need be. But that's where I stand on it. Hopefully that clarifies. And if you have any other questions, let me know.
Well, and John, Representative Terry Wilson wanted to chime in here as well. Mr. Pyatt mentioned him. So if you could start moving him over. And I know I will say, Mayor had said something about council voting on it. I think I've made my position pretty public from the dais on this topic. And I'll reiterate, I don't want us to break any laws or break any orders that will potentially cause financial harm through the legal system to the citizens of Georgetown and the city as a whole. But I would like to see the city, and I believe we pretty much for the most part do now, follow the governor's orders and no more, to have no additional restrictions, and basically do the bare minimum and allow people to assess their risk, make decisions on their own, and they can determine what their risk is, and they can go if they want to go, or they don't have to go if they don't have to go. But I don't want to see us do anything over and above what we are required to do. Representative Wilson.
No, thank you, Councilman Pitts. And look, total agreement with the mayor and the councilman. At the end of the day, the governor was very clear recently stating that he does not see a repeat of the closing. And the fact of the matter is, and I'll just get to the point, it's unprecedented in terms of how fast vaccines have come online within a year. And the bottom line is, and matter of fact, less a year. Here in Texas, we're going to see a total of 1.4 million doses in Texas by the end of December. There's already 109 distribution locations in terms for which vaccinations will be given. And those in the plan, as the vaccinations come into the state, is gotten down to the level for which they will be delivered to pharmacies to be distributed to give to our citizens that we serve. And look, the governor is very clear. The fact of the matter is this is to a point where it's in the hands, in terms of local control, more importantly, in the hands of individuals. We are seeing spikes, especially in the El Paso, Panhandle areas and so forth like that. Where we're getting concerned is in our rural hospitals. We are seeing a situation for which those that do have ICUs are reaching capacity within our ICUs. But again, back to your point, Mr. Pipe, this is one of those things where we have learned a lot. We are leaning forward. Vaccines are in place. Our protection, our PPP is now in place and stockpiles. And the governor is fully stated that he does not see another shutdown.
Thank you, Representative Wilson. Okay, we have this question about Shell Road and the 2015 bond, which we'll address now. After that, I see no one with their hand up. I believe there's been no other. I believe I've addressed every question that was asked to me prior to the meeting, and I see no other questions that have been texted in or emailed in. So if you have a question, you'd like to ask a question, get yourself prepared now, because after this question, it looks like we had nothing else to talk about. So the question here is, in the 2015 road bond, there was funding included for planning of the future Shell Road widening project. How much was allocated in 2015 in the 2015 bond for Shell Road, and has it begun yet? So there were funds in there for, like I said, the planning and engineering, and at this point, none of that money has been issued. None of those bonds have been issued, and therefore the planning and engineering has not been done on that. And I don't remember the exact amount that was allocated. David, do you recall?
I don't, but I can follow up with whoever's asking that question. But those would be dollars that would be authorized to use. We've been fast at work of getting all the construction projects done. So we started, we started the design at DB Woods, and so, but there aren't any construction dollars available for Shell Road, which I know is an important project that's going to be considered in the 2021 bond.
Well, and I see, speaking of that, I see Steve Bohnkamp is on the this meeting as well. He is one of our representatives that was appointed by me to the mobility committee. So he probably knows that answer better than any of us, because he's been dealing with this for several months now. But I hope that answers the question well enough there. So basically, the funds have not been allocated at this point, and I do not know exactly. I do not recall the exact amount that was allocated in that bond package. So Steve raised his hand, and Gloria Reyes and Nigel Wingate, you have your hands up. I'm going to jump over you real quick for Steve Bohnkamp, just because I think he can probably help address this question, honestly. So if you'll forgive me for that. Steve?
Councilman, my understanding of the monies that were allotted in 2015 bond issue, excuse me, was about $3 million. And I do know that nothing was spent in the planning or engineering design area. The city's changed up how they're going to be doing roads, where they're not going to pre-engineer road systems. They're going to actually, choose or the city council will choose the projects that will be done, and engineering will be done at that point in time. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, on that. I do know that the Shell Road project has been talked about a lot on the 2021 bond committee, and it's typically been ranked in the top 3 or 4 projects in the city of Georgetown, and even gotten feedback from input from the public. The latest ones had it rated very high as well. So basically, the city staff now is going to be doing a presentation to city council because there's a timing involved in getting a bond issue on the docket and approved. And the city council will have to choose, from the list that's been discussed by the Georgetown Mobility Committee. Every project on that list is valid. I mean, we could use every one of them. The problem is we don't have unlimited funds to, go after and do them all at one time. So, Shell Road, I think, I feel optimistic about Shell Road being on the next bond issue, but that's really going to be up to the city councilman.
I think, and Steve, very, very good points. I think what council was facing and why they've asked for the committee to get together and consider for consideration for a 2021 mobility bond was that the city had started the last construction or initiation of the last construction project in the 2015 bond, but there are roads, including Shell, where there is design money available through the 2015 bond authorized. And I think the question in front of council was, do we start doing the design elements in the 2015 bond program, or does the community want to see construction projects and turning dirt sooner than that, than the completion of all this design work? The other issue is if you have these projects engineered and designed and sitting on the shelf, it doesn't take much for there to have to be significant redesign work if you see development activity or things happen on the roadway that would have to change the design. And so the concern is to spend a lot of dollars on design work, only have to spend more dollars on redesign work because they sit on the shelf too long, and we don't turn that into implementation of transportation of the actual construction project. And so I believe that's really why council shifted to say, no, let's go ahead and move forward and consider additional construction projects. And to do that, let's put a bond committee together and consider a transportation bond as early as May of 2021.
Yeah, and I know from talking about the CIP process, the 5-year CIP, deciding how much bond debt to layer in and trying to stay within our tax rate. Issuing bonds for planning and engineering that is essentially paper. People aren't going to people can't drive on planning and engineering. So trying to concentrate more on projects that would help relieve stress immediately rather than pre-planning to hope to get some Campo or some kind of other funding, or just to have that ready to go just didn't seem like the best strategy. So that's one reason that one, and same with the Berry Creek Drive, have not been moved up the list that were approved in previous bonds. We have Ms. Reyes. You are up next, up again. I believe you can unmute.
Yes,
yourself.
thank you so much. We'll just make it a real quick question. I had also asked that question before the meeting into the District 5, I think, email. It might have gone to there. But the question regarding Wolf Ranch and that parkway, the gridlock that is a result of the Chick-fil-A business, it's all great and good, but there are times that it comes to a stop. It impacts 29, it impacts the businesses across the street from Wolf Ranch. You can't get to the bank, you can't get into the center because everybody's piled up and they're all in line for Chick-fil-A. How are we addressing that? That's been an issue for as long as I've lived here.
Are you saying on 29 or within Wolf Ranch itself?
I believe you're referring to the vehicular movement within the Wolf Ranch Town Center development. I believe that's the case.
Yes, yes. So who would address that? I mean, that's a horrible intersection there. You can't move. You just can't move either way.
I understand where you're coming from. I think Chick-fil-A generates a significant amount of traffic. one of the most common questions we get, in addition, well, one of the most common questions we get is when are we getting another Chick-fil-A in Georgetown? But because part of the issue is there's so much demand for that specific location.
right.
You don't have those same issues with you don't have the same issues with
Any
Carl's.
one of those along that stretch, right?
Right. And so it's not really that the use is an issue, because you have similar uses up and down that specific internal roadway to the development. It has to do with the demand related to Chick-fil-A. So
Correct.
it's funny because I saw the Chick-fil-A representing the franchise owner, and I always say, hey, I hear this rumor that you're building another Chick-fil-A, and they're like, stop that, don't spread that rumor. I'm like, well, I'm hoping eventually there'll be another one that's opened up, because I think ultimately what needs to happen is for there to be a reduction in the demand, which I think the only way you're going to see that is maybe for another location to be opening up. We actually see, to be honest with you, we see similar issues with stores like Discount Tire, where there's a stacking on. It's not as bad because it's a larger roadway on Rivery,
Right.
but there can be significant backups to Discount Tire, and it's just specifically because that use, and they're kind of overwhelming that use. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know of specific things we can do to address the internal network of Wolf Ranch Town Center specifically. And I understand your concern, but I don't know of something immediately that we can do to address that, because it is an internal roadway. It's not a public road,
Okay.
and so what I would say is do what I do, which is I usually enter in Wolf Ranch Parkway down off the access road, and I exit down off the access road.
Right, right. There's an empty lot right next to them that, they can certainly make their business a little bit bigger, or so they could get a better flow within there,
Right.
within that area. But thank you so much.
And Ms. Reyes, I just saw your emails in my mailbox. Sorry, I stopped checking it once the meeting started, so I see they came in. You did ask one about Suddenlink. So after Mr. Wingate here asks his question, I will be happy to talk about Suddenlink for a little bit.
Hi, yeah, I raised my hand so that I could just thank you, the four of you, the state representative, the mayor, yourself, and your good friend, Mr. David there, for holding this thing. This has been enormously valuable. But the last lady on just triggered something in my mind. I just remembered the two entries between the frontage road on 35 and Austin are absolutely lethal. The traffic is backed up out of the McDonald's drive-in so that it completely blocks the right-hand lane of Williams as it arrives at Austin. There must have been rear ender after rear ender there. I've seen the traffic backed up all the way to the light and beyond, and we know that that's a huge problem. So is there anything in the works? Just shut them, for example?
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Sure. So good news, bad news. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I guess. I thought it would.
The reason for that is because that intersection is getting ready to be entirely reconstructed, which includes the location on Williams Drive and Austin Avenue. So that whole intersection is going to get redone. I think it'll be significantly improved, but I believe there'll still be some access points. But the difference will be that there'll be a median on Williams Drive. So you basically can't cut across either direction to get to if you're going one direction, you're trying to get to the cut across lanes to get to the Starbucks and the Chipotle or other things that are in that shopping center. And if you're going the other direction, you're trying to cut in to get to the McDonald's. I think it's being exacerbated right now because McDonald's, I believe their lobby is still, or their internal store is still not open to the public. So the only way to get food from McDonald's right now is to go through the drive-through. So making the drive-throughs, much busier than it normally is. But I think the ultimate solution is the whole reconstruction of the intersection. You can go online, go to the My35 website online, and you can see what the actual configuration of Williams Drive and the overpass will be. Now, the important thing is that the lanes, there will be lanes opened up. So it's not like the intersection will be completely shut down, but it'll be significant construction. But as Councilman Pitt said earlier, that's why the Northwest Boulevard Bridge is so critical. and we will make sure that that bridge is constructed. I've been assured by our staff as well as TxDOT staff that our bridge for Northwest Boulevard will be open before they start the main lane construction of Williams Drive. What you see on the construction right now is you see the access roads and bypass roads starting to be constructed on adjacent to I-35. So that's the construction they're starting on. But again, we're going to get that Northwest Boulevard bridge. So my encouragement to all of you is that if you really want to see what's going on with construction of Williams, then I'd encourage you to use the bridge, take a look to the right, to the south, slow down a little bit, not too slow, but slow down a bit. You could see that, but you basically have another avenue to use to get across I-35 versus Williams while they're doing the construction.
Thank you, David. And Mr. Wingate, thank you for the kind comments, and appreciate you joining. There was a question emailed to me. So we got one question emailed to me that I'll talk about for a little bit. And then I believe if Representative Wilson is still on, a question for him, and then we'll close out. It's 7:22, and we want to close by 7:30. I think we got some staff members up here need to get home. So, so the question was about Suddenlink. What can the city do? What can we do about getting another provider? Yeah, I don't, let me see here. I'll read it off. What can be done about the poor service of the provider, and are they exclusive to Georgetown? So Suddenlink is, well, there are other providers and internet providers in Georgetown. Frontier is on the kind of, I guess, east side of town, northeast side of town. And there are some over-the-air providers. I think Rock Solid, I believe, is a company I've heard of, and SOS, but those are over-the-air providers. And I know for me, I've looked into it, and where I live, we have too many big mature trees and the signal can't get to my house. So it doesn't work out. Suddenlink is, if they have a monopoly here, it has nothing to do with the city of Georgetown. Suddenlink is the main provider here because they're the ones that have lines in the ground. There's nothing that the city is doing that is deterring any of their competitors from coming here to Georgetown. Trust me, the reason if you look right now, if you saw a while ago, the lights, I'm in an office in City Hall, and I was sitting still, I guess, too long, and the lights cut off, and I got them cut back on. But the reason I'm here is because I couldn't take this call from home, because the last time I was running the finance meeting for the city of Georgetown, and my Suddenlink cut out, and I had to try to find a way to get back on the call with my cell phone using Verizon internet or cell service instead of my home Suddenlink. So you're preaching to the choir. You know, one thing that comes up at every time we've had a town hall, which I think this is my, I don't know, 6th or so, I guess, Suddenlink comes up every single time. And one of the questions, what are you going to do about Suddenlink? And I always said, well, tell me what I can do and I'll do it. Well, I saw an article last year that the city of Victoria sent a resolution of dissatisfaction to the PUC. So I said, well, there's something. So myself and Councilmember Fott put that on the agenda, and we sent a letter, and we copied Representative Wilson and our state senator as well, Schroeder, letting them know. But whenever that item came up, we did have an executive from Suddenlink come into town and, you know, try to let us know what's going on, but nothing has really improved. But I do have his cell phone now, so anybody has any issues, let me know and I'll get you his cell phone number, because that's what he told me to do. But which it should never come to the executive of the company having to get brought in for your internet being out. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. If we could get another provider here, I would love it. I would be happy to give any type of incentives that we are legally able to. I want another provider just as bad as anybody else does. So I can rant on about Suddenlink, but David, I see you sitting there. If you don't want to chime in, you don't have to. I didn't know if you're planning on saying something.
No, there is a common misconception that there is some kind of monopoly that Suddenlink has, or the city is keeping other providers from coming into Georgetown. And I think Councilman Pitts has squarely, appropriately said that that is not the case at all. And we've actually, the council recently approved a small cell node, which allows for enhanced, or will allow for a path to have improved cell coverage for AT&T in Georgetown. But one of the quick questions was, is this going to, AT&T, or are you going to come in and provide internet broadband services in Georgetown? And their answer was, well, that's not the same part of the company. And we specifically asked those questions too. we've, when we hear about a company that may be expanding, that we take the proactive step from a staff perspective and meet with them and trying to figure out what obstacles are in their way. And really, from my perspective, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Suddenlink, I'm not speaking on behalf of the industry, but I think some of the challenges are the significant investment that's required, because a fiber network really is required in order to be able to provide the backbone services. So there's significant investment on the front end that I think that can keep companies from coming in and making a broad offering of broadband services. And the second thing is just the dynamic nature of that industry. You've seen the cable service and dish service and all those things really change quite a bit over the last 20 years. And so when you're asking for someone to make that kind of investment in an environment that changes from a technology standpoint, I think maybe those are some of the challenges. But again, that's not making excuses for any other company. We would love to have another provider be in Georgetown, or multiple providers be in Georgetown, and can look at that. And we're open to looking at that and exploring opportunities.
Thank you, David. Yeah, once again, one of those things that everyone on the council has the same internet probably. I think maybe one council member said he has Frontier, but we are all in the same boat. Okay, our last question, and then we'll all call it a night here, I guess. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Some have hopped off now, which is perfectly fine. But our last question is actually going to be for Representative Wilson. I'll read it out to you real quick. It says here at the, let's say at the last District 5 Town Hall, your legislative assistant was there and mentioned that the issue of state funding versus local governments funding substantial road construction has some history at the Texas legislature, and that action could be taken to return to a time before TxDOT and the Texas legislature passed to do cities and counties. Any possibility of a change to reduce a local burden on road construction?
Thanks, Councilman. The answer is yes, but it's going to take some time. One of the things that I've learned in the Texas legislature with my second session under my belt, about to go into third, is good legislation usually does anywhere from 3 to 5 sessions to really get quality bills on the table and passed. One of the things, and by the way, thank you for remembering Jeff Frazier's visit in support of Councilman Pitts during the town hall. He mentioned the issue associated with what we call pavement consumption. And pavement consumption is the wearing out of our roads. And the vast majority of the wearing out, believe it or not, actually is from heavy trucks. And those trucks, basically, especially the ones that are overweight, hauling aggregate and other means, all they have to do is apply for a $900 plus permit, and they get to use the roads for a year. But under the Texas Transportation Institute study that took place a couple years ago, and that was a study with both Texas A&M and University of Texas together. And yes, those two universities can work together. But what they found was rather interesting is that trucks overweight, well over 80,000 pounds, has an 86 cent per mile per truck pavement degradation. In other words, the consumption of pavement is tore up to that extent. And so when you look at the volume of traffic that we have on the roads, and the fact of the matter that it's mostly trucks that is doing the trucks doing the damage, a smaller percent as it pertains to weather issues. But the bottom line is our county, well, frankly, our local governments are having a very hard time with their current budget maintaining the roads. Not even really when you look at the fact that capacity is really needs to be increased significantly considering our growth. And so what will take place is a bill will get on the table this session, both in the House and the Senate. We already have a Senate sponsor to basically carry this bill that will basically get into an understanding of how we can implement surcharges, if you will, on those overweight trucks to a point for which a lot of those revenues per cent per a basic cent per mile coming back into our municipalities and our counties to help sustain and maintain those roads. So Texas Transportation Institute will be basically, if the legislation passes, will basically be tasked to do phase 2 of the survey, which is the implementation of how we can go about doing this, leveraging some things that the federal government has already placed or put into gear or motion on our trucks, actually tracking where these trucks are going. So there are large possibilities. There's other thoughts out there in terms of what we can do. But the one thing I do know is that our general revenue, essentially we get funding within our general revenue from the fuel taxes that you pay at the pump, and a good portion of those go back into the roads. But the bottom line is there is significant concern, especially when you consider that Europe just recently announced that that trucks will be transitioning from diesel to electric because of their frames and durability of their frames and load capacity on those frames, the battery technology and so forth, and the electric drives of those trucks. It's more practical for them to transition, yes, you heard me correctly, from diesel to electric. That's a pretty big concern when you consider that our revenue that we get on road maintenance and so forth and capacity increase happens to come from our fuel taxes. So we're gonna be forced to address this sooner rather than later, and we hope that we can get something done this session.
All right, Representative Wilson, thank you very much for not only joining us, but being willing to answer some questions too. So I really appreciate that. Mayor, thank you for joining. David, thank you for your support. I'd also like to thank Allie Van Dyke. She is our communications communications director, and she really helped with this and helped market the event as well. And then John Fusco is the brains behind this. He's the smart guy that actually knows how to do all this, and we all just show up and he tells us what to push and how to cut it on. And so if it wasn't for him, none of us would have been able to be here today. So John, thank you. I want to thank everybody that joined us. I know, like I said, many of us, several have hopped off already. It's okay. Thank you all. And until next time, I don't know when it will be, but we will, hopefully the next one we do will be in person. Everybody have a good night.